Greetings, one and all, and welcome to another edition of the Dinner Club one-on-one interviews. And I for the first time in this entire process, I have not accidentally dead named my channel. Today we're interviewing two people. First of which is my good friend BrianJ. How are you doing, Brian?
That you've got something that's playing in the background, or I have.
Hang on, let me make sure I don't. No, I got nothing playing.
No, it was me. My
Okay,
bad.
cool.
I thought I had that closed down. Obviously, I didn't.
Anyway, for people,
there you go. That was a blur of confusion.
Well, for people who
So,
don't
where
know,
were we? Hello.
We've been doing this channel now for like 7 years, plus or minus, and BrianJ has been a guest contributor on the channel off and on, and more often since we've been doing the jamborees and stuff, haven't you, Brian? So that's great.
That's right, yeah.
And you are one of my beloved limey mates. Who did you ever live over here in the UK? Or sorry,
You
in the
mean
USA?
in the US?
Yeah.
Not officially, but unofficially, I've lived there for 2-3 month stints.
Right.
I mean, 3 months was the maximum.
That's an extended holiday, really.
Extended holidays, yes, but you know, anything over 3 weeks is, you know, is not holiday anymore, really, is it? You've kind of moved in.
Well, I suppose you start to, yeah. You start to grow moss if you stay too long.
Exactly.
Anyway, so right. So Brian, as I say to everybody, I've got a set of stock questions here that I ask everybody, and then I've got different questions for different people. If some of these questions are a bit personal, as you might have observed, if anything is something that you don't feel comfortable answering, that's fine. You don't have to answer anything.
Yeah, I just won't.
Yeah, just go, dude, mind your own business. What the fuck? This is, anyway.
Yeah.
Or
with that in mind, I'm going to go over to headphones.
Okay. All right. So, right. So first of all, obviously you're British. Were you born in England?
I certainly was. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, little county on the.
That's as narrow as we need it to be.
Oh, okay.
Michael pointed out that we don't want to give away doxable details and anything that some data miner might want to get. So you're right. I thought
fair enough.
I shouldn't be asking people what town they were born in or whatever, especially when you got your birth year right there on your name.
Fair enough.
Anyway, so and did you were you raised in the same area you were born?
No, I was raised all over the shop initially because my dad was in the RAF.
Oh, wow.
So I had been to at least 2 continents by the time I was 2 years old. Those continents being Africa, Europe. Are we actually, is the UK on the European plate? It is on the European plate. Yes, otherwise the channel wouldn't have been possible.
Yeah, so's Iceland, right? Yeah, the tunnel would have
exactly, right? So yeah.
And so you're born in 1962, just like me. So we're pretty much the old guys on this channel, right?
I know, right?
And but I mean, being
old,
the seasoned members, we've seen a lot more changes that have gone on. But having lived in the UK as I did for 31 years, I know that the UK has changed a hell of a lot in leaps and bounds, say from the time that we were small children in the late 60s.
Oh, you're not kidding.
And especially like through the 70s. And I'm interested to pick your head because once upon a time, you could tell a man's social class by the hat that he wore, right?
True.
And when I was first in the UK, which was the early 90s, John Major famously said he wanted to create a classless society, right? Do you remember that?
And, I remember it. He failed miserably.
As a fresh off the boat American in the UK, I was like, what do you mean a classless society? Because I mean, there's such a thing as middle class in America, but we didn't think in those terms. And I didn't have to live in the UK for very long before I realized that it wasn't that long ago where, I mean, you really didn't mix that much outside your social classes in the UK, did you, in the 70s and so on? before?
Well, the 70s was kind of when it changed. A lot of
Right.
it changed, and you can thank I, I guess you can thank the beatniks for that, really, because they went everywhere, and and you had. I remember when I was growing up in the early 70s, there was a cafe called the Sombrero, and I was forbidden to go into this place because bikers frequented it. And of course, it was the only place in the town that had pinball machine. And pinball, as you know, was a thing in the 70s.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I did. I snuck in occasionally. Got on really well. Really nice place. But I never let my mother find out. Because A, she had put a very strict moratorium on it. You know, if I ever hear that you've gone in there, I'll thrash you within an inch of your life, sort of thing. Um, but as an adult, I think I understand her fears a little bit more. She's probably worried that I was going to get into drugs and knife fights and all of the stereotypical tropish things that come with bikers.
Right.
Um, Nonetheless, I ended up a biker myself anyway in my mid to later teens. So yeah, so much for parental moratoriums on cafes. Doesn't work, people.
There's a whole thing that anybody who got through their own childhood should know that kids are going to push back
Yeah,
so it's just, yeah, you got to be careful how you do that.
pick your battles. Pick the fights that you're going to want your teens to be pushing back on. You can do
Right.
it.
Well, speaking of fights, it's often the case, Brian, that kids who move around a lot get in a lot of fights. Was that the case for you when you were young?
I got a lot of bullying.
You got a lot of what?
I got a lot of bullying.
Oh, bullying. Right.
Yes, I was bullied a lot. Um, that's probably one of the reasons why I do enjoy YouTube and being on the radio and the dinner club as much as I do, because I was trying to think of the best way to phrase this. Um, it gives you an interface to moderate some of the social skills that I maybe missed out on as a younger child.
Mm.
So it sort of it helps to mitigate some of the issues that come up with that, I guess. It probably exacerbates others, but you know, especially no.
What were you like when you were a kid though? Were you into were you in like in school? Were you into sports? Were you like into art,
Nope.
music? What?
I've always been into music. One of my earliest memories is sitting at my Aunt Jo's piano and just banging away because it was pleasing to me, and then turning round and somehow over the course of, I don't know, half an hour to an hour, I built up an audience of my Aunt Jo and my parents. It was like, okay. Um, but yeah, surprisingly, I never actually officially learned the piano.
Right.
I taught myself from then on, really. So
So
the two
everybody
good
else
skills
I
I have.
asked who was the president when they were born, but since you're British, I'll have to ask
I
you
can
who.
tell you, I I can ironically I can tell you who the president was. I believe it was Kennedy.
Yeah, yeah.
As far as who was prime minister, uh,
Was it Harold
no,
Wilson?
I was just gonna say Harold Wilson. That was the
'Cause it was a turbulent
70s.
time in the early '60s. They traded governments like 3 times in the space of 4 years or something like that back then. So I don't really have
Yeah,
straight in my head either.
I don't really know. I didn't really clue into who was our
Yeah.
leader until the 70s when I started sort of hitting the teens.
Right, right. And is it fair to say you were 15 in 1977, so you must have
Yeah.
been punk.
No, I
No,
wasn't punk.
you
No,
weren't a punk.
I wasn't a punk.
That
No,
shocks me, Brian. Were you into
no.
the new romantic thing later on?
Uh, eh, I got into punk later.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Um, yeah, I got into punk later. But in order of dawning in my consciousness, chronological order. That's the word I was looking for. Chronological. Um, musically, I was exposed to classical music and stuff from the 20s through to the 40s and the 60s by my grandparents and parents. Um, things like Bobby V, the Beatles, stuff like that. From my grandparents, it was people like uh, Homer and Jethro, the guy that originally did Donald, Where's Your Trousers? Um, so my grandparents had a lot of the Bakelite 78s. My mother, they also had a couple of 16 and whatever the fraction was. Um, didn't see very many of those coming out of the 60s because they died along with the 78.
Yeah.
Because going into the late 60s and 70s, the two dominant were the 45 and the 33 and a third. What else? Tell Laura I love her. So yeah, all of that 50s and 60s stuff. Then in the 70s, I was hit by bands like Led Zeppelin, Nazareth, Deep Purple, Quo, to my shame, Gary Glitter, um, Slade.
Yeah, I have to push back on that. Why are you ashamed of liking Gary Glitter? Just because he's a pedophile?
Yeah, and when I look back on it, one of my axioms in life is when people tell you who they are, listen to them. And Gary Glitter certainly told us who he was.
Right.
Yeah.
You look
And
at stuff like that,
in
and it's
my
hindsight makes it seem obvious, right? But when
yes, I know, but
um,
in my naivete, yeah, I mean, damn, talk about grooming an entire generation, as
right.
potential prey when they turned up on Jim Will Fix It. I
Well, I
mean,
mean, and the Jim
geez.
will fix it is the one that's the worst one, wasn't he? Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, all he did was he sort of provided a venue for his little star friends to come and join the party to make light of it somewhat.
Yes.
So yeah, I suppose it's I'm more pissed off with myself for the naivete and not seeing it, but I was a child, so therefore blameless in that instance. So therefore, yeah, I'm sorry, Glitter, but you inherit that that set of emotions.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I only know one Gary Glitter song, and I just think it's hilariously just like that whole glam rock thing that was going on in the middle of the 70s or early mid 70s. It was just
Oh,
another
that
one of
was
those.
fun.
It was just another one of those to me, and I didn't think further past it. And I didn't really find out who Gary Glitter was until I moved to the UK, and then I was like, okay, now but I didn't
Yeah,
really know.
at the time, you're right. He was just another one of those glam rock.
Yeah, right there with
But
Sweet, the Bay City Rollers, or you know, any of those types of bands.
my sister loved the Bay City Rollers. I wasn't a fan. But then she also liked the Wombles, and she's a bit younger than me as well. So she
Yeah.
has her excuses. I have mine.
So, hey, Brian, when you were going through school, did you like school or did you resent school or what? How do you feel about school?
I liked school right up until the point I got bored. And then shortly after I got bored, I had this huge um, catch up thing that I had to sort of like catch up 2 years. I ended up 2 years behind, and I had to get up to scratch for exams within 3 years, and it was yeah, it was a lot of work for me, and it was only towards the end of that 3 year period where I started to enjoy it again.
Right.
But then my objections to school were driven by something else, and that was my figuring out, hell, I'm being programmed to be one of A, B, C, D, or E, and I'm not sure I want to do any of those. I want
Right.
to I want to know what else is out there in the world to choose from. I don't want to be limited to military, academia, religion, politics, things like that. It was like there's more to it than that. There's got to be.
Well,
So
yeah.
that
And
was
and
that
that was
was
the
when I rebelled.
yeah, and that's the life you pursued, isn't it?
Yeah, that was the life that I pursued.
You never been a cookie cutter kind of guy.
No, no, and one of the reasons I've sort of moved around as much as I have is because I do get bored very easily.
Sure.
It's like, with the nightclubs, I got to the point where I could run more or less the entire place. Excuse me. Yeah, more or less the entire place. And if I had the health issues, um, I probably would have got bored at some point and then decided, because I can remember I was thinking about, having a career in IT at that point, because computers, I, played with them from, the early 70s when my dad bought us a ping pong machine. So that fascinated me for a while. And then throughout the 80s, I followed the development and I sort of moved up slowly from an Oric 48 up through the Spectrum and then the Ataris and ultimately with the PC clones.
Right.
And yeah, beginning of the 90s, I thought, yeah, maybe this is time to actually turn this into a career, especially as I've sort of done some of the office, inductions and,
Sure.
learning curves and shit like that. So yeah, that was when I switched to IT and did that for a while. And now that I'm sort of retired, disabled as it were, it's nice to turn my attentions back to music again.
Right. I'm sure.
So and yeah, so that's given me a lot of pleasure, being on the radio, and also finally getting some of my music well, it's not into print, is it? It's oh yeah, it is in print, yeah, because they print CDs, don't they?
Yeah.
They get the
Yeah.
master and then they print them. Yeah,
They stamp them, yeah, on foil, and then
yeah,
they laminate them with plastic. Yeah.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
I should know that. I've worked in a Sony plant, so I should know that.
Yeah. So when you were going through school, did you have a favorite teacher?
I had a couple.
Yeah.
One of them, he's dead now, unfortunately. Bless him. Um, a Mr. Dodson. He was our maths teacher, and he basically took me from being um, a 2 years behind dunce into being able to leave school with two maths O levels.
Give me a second, Brian. My kid's calling me from
Yeah,
you.
no worries.
You're calling from Britain. I'll be right back.
Okay. So yeah, while Paul's doing that, I'll just expound on what I mean by two maths at O level. Most people, just go through and they get their I don't know what it is these days. It's just like a general certificate. Uh, um, GCE, General Certificate of Education, in various subjects. And you get maths, you get English, you get all the typical mandatory ones, and you get a few that are sort of choice. But yeah, I ended up coming out with maths and additional maths. So yes, our maths teacher, my maths teacher, Mr. Donson. Yeah, I had a lot of time for that man because he gave me the love for maths that I've had as an adult.
Well, that's amazing, and also it's interesting because having a teacher. I mean, some people don't have a favorite teacher, and that's obviously fair enough. No, not everybody has a favorite, but it
Mm,
interests me when people say they've got a favorite teacher. It's almost always that teacher helped them learn something that they were having trouble learning, and or the teacher was hilarious. One or the other usually tends to fall down on that's the reason why they were a favorite, and means that there's some people that are teachers, they do take that time. They
they
spot
do,
the
yeah,
student that will take the help and help them. I just don't know. I think teachers are one of the most undervalued professions in our society, really.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
And the thing with the maths as well that blew me away, in the school that I was at beforehand, which is the one that where I got bored. I tried to just, as your kids, you talk about shit, you know. Um, and one of the things that came up was, I wonder how many seconds there are in a lifetime or in a year. And I thought, well, there's got to be a way to work that out, surely. So put my mind to it and sort of worked it all out. And I approached a maths teacher at that school and went to them with my workings.
right.
And they went through them and they said, yeah, you've got that right and you've understood it. But there is a much easier way to do it using logarithms. And they showed me how to do that, and I was like fascinated. And I sort of, made these clicks between what was happening in the book and what I'd seen my father doing on slide rules.
Right.
Yeah. And I was fascinated by this. And they said, yeah, don't worry about that. You've got to, at least another 2 years before you have to even think about that. And I was like, oh, okay, fine, all right. And we went back to 2 + 2, 7 × 3, blah 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 blah, all that shit. And I got bored stiff. Um, and when I went to the next school, um, I had to do a streaming exam, and I was faced with this problem. And long story short, it needed Pythagoras to solve it. And I was just looking at this thinking to myself, well, there's obviously got to be a way to solve this, but I haven't got a fucking clue where even to begin. So I just didn't put anything, and I sort of went through the rest of the exam doing the bits that I could and leaving the bits that I couldn't. And after the streaming exam, when we were, put into our streams, I just happened to be with this teacher in his class. And who was it that he picked to go through the Pythagoras answer with? With the school? He picked me. And I sat there and I got very embarrassed. And, I was like, honestly, I have no idea. And by the time I came out of that lesson, and he went through eventually, and picked one of the other kids, and they went through it, and everybody else in that class was, on the ball and with him and following and producing stuff. And I was just sitting there like this, just completely mystified by all of this mumbo jumbo that was going on. And he took me aside afterwards and he said, "You really had no idea about this, did you?" And I was like, "No, I didn't even dream that stiff stuff like this existed."
Right.
Um, and I think it was from that moment on, because he saw the light both come on in my eyes and die. And I think he probably, felt a little bit sorry for me because, there was something about the stuff that I liked, obviously,
Yeah.
but again, there was something about it that killed me inside, and I think he wanted to get me over that. And I'm very, very grateful that he did, because maths has been a joy as an adult. It really has, various
Yeah.
things, and in so many topics as well, like from music, as you know yourself, right the way up to things like quantum and astrophysics. You
Yeah, I
know,
mean, if you have a basic understanding of arithmetic, you can get so. I mean, it's one of the few things you actually do need to learn in school.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, that
Which is
you
which is why
need
I've
to
never got that.
get.
Which is why I've never got that joke. Well, what do I need to learn this for? It's not like I need it outside.
Right, right, yeah.
Well, except for knowing when I've got the right change.
Yeah,
It's like, oh, oh. And what temperature is outside,
yeah,
and whether the car's got enough juice to start it, and it's like
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Speaking of cars, what was the first car you ever had that was your own car?
that was my own car. I can't remember the year. It was probably something like a '67 or '69, but it was a Triumph Herald,
Oh
and
wow.
I owned it for all of a day and a half.
Why is that?
Because well, I was what 16, 17, didn't have my license yet, and I bought it cheap from somebody just up the road.
And
And
define cheap at the era that you were in when you bought it. Like my first car cost me $600, and it just blows my mind when I think about that now.
it cost me 50 quid.
50 quid. Yeah. You can't
Yeah,
even fill the tank up for that now.
no. Even though, I mean, then had I been a little bit more savvy than I was, I would have known that 50 quid, yeah, it's a bucket of bolts. It's going to fall apart first time you drive it. And that is, in fact, what happened.
Oh wow.
Uh,
So you bought it, you bought a total lemon.
I bought an absolute lemon. Um, uh, a friend of mine's brother, who was going to help me sort of fix it up and get it roadworthy and yada yada yada, he said to me, he said, "Whatever you do, do not drive this. Just don't drive. Just leave it. We'll park it in Julio's back garden there because it's not going to. And we'll get to it." And I was
Oh,
like,
you couldn't help yourself, could
"But
you?
it's my car. It's an open top. You know, it's like it's sunny day. I want to go out. I want to take my car out for a drive." So I did, and we got it out onto the road, started it up. It's fine. Uh, Drove down the road 50 yards, took a left turn, drove another 50 yards, and the front axle went,
Oh my God. Wow.
yeah. So
So
this
let me,
thing
so
was
tell me about
not
your second
moving.
car then. Tell me about your second car then. Your first actual car.
My first actual car wasn't a car, it was a bike.
Oh,
And it was a Czechoslovakian CZ175.
I like the
Um,
sound of that, but I don't have any clue what it looks like.
uh,
Yeah.
standard road bike, only this particular model, instead of having the typical square tank that you'll see with most CZ motorcycles, it had a teardrop tank,
Okay.
which had been customized by the person that I bought it from, or the place where I bought it from.
And
Um,
you have like a whole series of bikes.
no, I had that one. Then after that, forget what happened to that. But it ended up somewhere. I was then on foot for a good number of years because by then I'd moved down to Brighton, and yeah, you don't need you. Well, if you're young and or if you're in your 20s and you're reasonably healthy, you don't need transport in Brighton because the place is geared up for buses and
Sure.
all of that stuff. So I didn't have another vehicle again until I lived a little way out of away from Brighton. and I needed a way to get to work on time in the mornings, and I was done with the idea of taking an hour's bus ride.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
I used to take public transport when I lived in the UK, and I never had a car the whole time I lived there. So in a sense, I totally depended on public transport. But there are definitely days when you resent the 45 minutes to go 7 miles.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
You know.
So I bought myself another bike. It was the wrong choice. It was Harley Davidson, believe it or not. It was a 125. Nice little off-road trials bike. But yeah, it was more of a hobby bike than something reliable. So then it was a Kawasaki Z400. That was reliable, and I used that until I was disabled and could no longer ride it anymore. Um, and then my first real car was a Fiat Punto, which I got through the Motability scheme as I
Right.
was coming out of my wheelchair phase, and decided, you know what, I need to be able to get around on my own
Those little
independently
Fiats are
without.
hilarious, right? Because they're like little tin boxes with wheel. It feels like a strong wind is going to push it away.
Yeah,
Or
the thing that got me about it, which I have not missed in all the cars that I've had since, is is the sound of the door closing. It sounded like you were, you know, slamming two sardine tins together.
they sound like an ATV when you shut the doors. Like it doesn't sound like a real vehicle. I don't
No,
know.
it doesn't. It doesn't. It doesn't.
Do you remember those cars? They're called 2CVs.
Yes, the French
Those
one,
those Fiats remind
Citroen.
me of those. Yeah, the Citroens. Yeah,
Yeah,
those the 2CV was supposed to, for people who've never seen one. They look kind of like a Volkswagen Bug except cheaper, and they're
squarer
yeah, square, and they're supposed to take two people in a sack of potatoes. I think that was the
and nothing else.
and nothing else. Two people in a sack of potatoes. Yeah.
Yeah, you try and stick a bag of carrots in there as well, and you got trouble.
Anyway, all right. So moving on with the questions here, Brian. How old do you reckon you were the first time you fell in love? And tell me about it.
Oh, the first time I fell in love, I was at primary school.
Never.
Uh, yes.
And you know
Um,
you still think you were in love. You don't. It wasn't like puppy love or whatever they call it.
oh,
If you felt like you were in love, that's good enough for me, brother. I'm just
yeah.
asking.
I felt like I was in love, and I was absolutely destroyed when I moved from the primary school up to the junior school and expected to see her walking around, and she had gone off to the high school or middle school or whatever it was, and I was absolutely destroyed.
Wow. Yep. And so did you have like a relationship with this person, or were you just like infatuated, or what?
Well, um, we did spend an awful lot of time together. In
Uh-huh.
retrospect, though, I realized that she was indulging this little kid from the lower school that was hanging around her skirts like a puppy.
I see.
Um, so yeah, it was certainly a one-way thing.
And
Um,
do you consider yourself someone who falls in love very easily?
Not anymore, no,
Not anymore. Yeah, the older
not
you get,
anymore.
the harder
Yeah,
it is, and especially
yeah.
because you found someone who's like the bomb. So why would
Well,
why would you never fall in love again, right? Yeah.
exactly. Why would I ever again? Exactly. But that is an interesting story in itself because I'd given up on it. I was,
Same.
uh, yeah, I more or less come to the conclusion that that's it. Yeah, I'm done. I'm single now for the rest of my life. And no, that's not how it's going to be. And yeah, no, I'm not. And I'm happy not to be.
Yeah,
I've
and
never been happy.
you guys must have been together now for 9 or 10 years.
Actually, this year we are having our 7th anniversary.
It seems like less. It seems like more to me. I feel like
2015 we were married.
I thought it was 2013. Okay, fair enough. Anyway,
No, 2015. 2013 may have been when we first bumped into each other and realized that we were probably sparring across from different sides of the debate table. But no, 20. Actually, you're right. We
I thought I lived on the boat when you and
Yeah, we did.
and I lived on the
Yeah,
boat in
when
2014. So that's the only reason I think it. I was pretty sure I lived on the boat. That's the
now
only
you mention it, yes, we did. It was the end of 2013
Hmm.
that we started sort of showing an interest in each other, and it was 2014 that I spent the summer in El Paso, and then 2015 when we lived in Colorado and we were married there.
Right. Well, there you go. That's
Yeah.
you know, I think and
So
you
you're
guys
right. Yeah, 2013.
and you guys met on the internet, right?
YouTube.
YouTube, right? That's what I
Yeah.
thought. Yeah. See, I think that's really, really cool because a lot of people say, "Oh, internet relationships never work out," and it's like, no, actually, I know quite a few who've been
Yeah,
together. You know,
they stand a similar chance of working out as relationships in real life, from my experience.
well, I mean, I don't even know. I have people coughing. You know, you want to hear something funny, Brian? People ask me for advice about their relationships all the time, and I'm like, dude, I've been divorced twice. What are you asking me for? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why would you ask me? I just want
Oh,
to say hi to Green Machine. I did notice you earlier, by the way, dude. I wasn't
is,
being rude. I was just trying to focus on the questions. And Agent of Doubt,
is it
who's
a doubt?
ripping,
Hello,
who's sloganing away in the chat room.
yeah, right. So Brian, you can take this question any way that you like. But
Okay.
what's the worst thing that you've done to get money?
The worst thing that I've done to get money, and I can take it whichever way. Ooh. I think the worst thing, and the way I'm taking it, is the worst for me. The
Yeah,
worst
that's the way I
thing
mean it.
for
That's the way I
me.
mean you to take it. Yeah.
Yeah, as in the most detriment. Had the most detriment on me. I think it was um, basically the years that I've spent as a wage slave. And the reason I use that term wage slave is very deliberate, because you're making minimum wage, you've got high expectations, you've got quotas, and if you miss the quota, it doesn't matter how much else you've given. If you miss that quota, you're out on your ear, or you're on warning, or whatever. And you break your back for these companies, and they really don't give a shit. You can be in there, let's say you start at 9, and you can be in there from 7 every morning. And that one day that you ask to leave an hour early, it'll be a case of, yeah, how badly do you need this job?
Right.
I mean, yeah, no, sorry.
So you took this question the same way I would take it. It's in a matter of exploitation. You know what I mean? You felt the worst thing you've done for money is
Was to allow myself to be
yourself to be
exploited.
exploited.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
What kind
As
of work
far
was that?
as it was all sorts of things, but the thing that comes to mind most poignantly is working in a call center.
Right. Fair enough.
And the reason that sticks out is because Ostensibly, my job was fixing customer problems,
Right.
and the actual remit was get through as many of these calls in a day as you can. Sorry, but do you want me to fix the customer's problem, or do you just want me to pay lip service to as many customers as I can say, hi, we're listening, bye,
Yeah, the
that I
latter.
can? Yeah, and it turned out to be the latter. So
Yeah.
sorry, fuck you and the horse you rode in on.
Yeah. Good for you.
That's
I would.
that's not customer service. Customer service is when you pick up a phone, yeah, and you spend whatever time it takes to have that customer putting the phone down, happy that he called you or she
Right.
called you.
I agree. And I wish that that was the typical philosophy behind customer service. It
Yeah,
used to be.
it
I
used to
feel
be.
like it used to be, but maybe I'm just
It did.
romanticizing the past. I don't
No, it
know.
used to be. I've got certificates somewhere in a drawer. Yeah, excellence for customer service. Yeah, and
Hmm.
those when I was given those meant something. Yeah,
Right.
you know. And
Now,
as a result, I was working in a team where everybody, yeah, was doing their best, yeah, to get one of those awards,
right.
and the level of service in that place was unparalleled.
Well, I mean, it's interesting you say that. This is one of the reasons I'm in favor of the tipping culture that they have in America, as opposed to the lack of it that is predominant in the UK when it comes to the service industry. When I used
Different
to,
view, but carry on.
well, yeah, but I personally like when I go to California. Anyway, I mean, if I used to go to the bar, my philosophy was I'm going to tip the bartender pretty heavy the first drink because, as you know, in California or in America, probably for that matter, they don't measure it out in the little jills like you do
No, they don't.
in the optics like you do in the UK.
Yeah,
So a mixed drink, is totally, well, at least partially dependent on whether the bartender wants you to have a nice stiff drink or not. And so you tip the guy or girl nicely on the first drink, and then you're going to get good service for the rest of the night. And you shouldn't have to tip them. I agree, but that's the system. And because the system works, when I used to live in Penzance, Brian, I went to Weatherspoons, and I walk up to the bar, and there would literally be three people behind the bar, wiping the bar, cleaning the glasses, fiddling with the till, no one serving customers. That would never
yeah. See,
happen. That
that's
would
all
never
wrong.
happen in
That's
America.
all wrong.
So,
That's all
to
wrong.
bring
And
up
if
those,
and when I was working bar, and I worked an awful lot of bar before I started managing bar. If I saw that in one of my bars, somebody is either getting fired or they're doing some sort of remedial course, something, yeah. And that remedial course was probably going to be me being the worst customer that you could ever encounter and expecting them to be able to deal with me without losing their temper, yeah, getting me the orders that I wanted, yeah, and getting a tip out of me, yeah. So, yeah, no, um, no, my
but you
bar.
disagree about tipping culture, though, right? I mean, you think
I
it should.
disagree. I disagree, and the reason I disagree is purely and simply that um, waiting staff, service staff, should not have to rely on those tips for their wages.
I
Yeah,
agree that they shouldn't have to rely on them. And in this country, that's a real problem because they will
yeah,
allow employers to pay less than minimum wage so that the tips make it
and
up to minimum wage. And that
that
is
is the problem.
scandal.
That
That's a
is the
scandal.
problem. Yeah, that's
I
that's the
can't believe it's even allowed
disagreement.
to happen.
Yeah.
But
Now, if all the time you're in a culture, yeah, I saw that. That's funny. All the time you're in a culture whereby um, you aren't going to get. Hang on, no. As I'm saying it, I'm thinking to myself, well, actually, yeah, it is a point. customer service does improve if you're reliant on those tips. But by the same token, you should be able to um, have a bad day, give passing service, and not suffer for it. Because at the end of the day, you went to work, you did your job.
Right.
People went away with the least what they came in for. Yeah. So you should not be penalized for that.
Yeah, I agree with you. And should it's all a matter of shoulds, though. You
It
know what I
is a
mean?
matter of shoulds, yes.
I mean,
Like with most
you
things.
shouldn't have to tip people because they should give you good service that you pay for. It should be built in to the price that you're paying. That's how it
Yeah.
should be, right? But it doesn't
Now,
always work that way.
now,
So yeah.
now, when I was back in that area of the world, yeah, both working bar and managing, um, the atmosphere and the climate that we had was, yeah, we used to have because we let staff keep their own tips, yeah. So at the end of the day, if you made more tips than somebody else, then obviously you were doing something they weren't. And that had the effect of improving customer service. And
Mm,
everybody was still getting paid their fair wage. Yeah. And we had a very high quality of service.
yeah.
So it's kind of like a bit like politics.
Right.
Um, the left is wrong, the right is wrong. Ideally, you want somebody who's in the middle who can
Right.
actually
Right.
compromise and make progress walking forwards instead of going left or right, left and right, left and right.
Right.
So same with customer service. Not, having mandatory tips, no.
I agree.
Not tipping, no. Somewhere in the middle where
Yes.
you're getting paid and you do get rewards for excelling at your trade.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. So, flipping the last question on its head, what do you reckon is
Okay.
the best job? What do you reckon is the best job you've ever had, or the easiest money you've ever made? Whichever way you like to take that question.
Ooh. Okay, well, depending on whichever way that question's taken,
Well, you could
you've
whichever you
got
think's
two
the-
different answers.
yeah, which is more.
So the easiest swag bag, um, that was working in IT because I've always had a love of technology, loved programming, loved giving software and hardware support, loved setting machines up and software and everything else, for clients, going over teaching them how to use the product. It's all of that. That was the thing that I loved. So all the time I was earning money doing that, I wasn't working.
Right,
So
you're laughing at you're laughing at because thinking they pay me to do this.
they pay me to do this. Now the other one, the best job, the thing that is most rewarding for me, I think is probably what I'm doing now, albeit on a volunteer basis. I'm not actually earning any money at it, but I'm having so much fun just talking shit into a microphone and playing music while I do so. It's just, yeah,
Yeah, that's
it's,
the ideal job, if you ask me, is being a
yeah,
DJ. I mean, I got my DJ
exactly.
shirt on,
Yeah,
and like,
exactly. I mean, when God was creating all the various professions for Monkey Man to do in the course of history, he saw the role of DJ and he said, "Yep, gonna have to make that one. Gonna have to make sure that Paul and Brian are around for that one."
born in the right century for that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, totally, man. Because I used to laugh about it because people ask me, "What do you do for a job?" And I say, "Well, I make my money with my mouth." And
I like that. I like that.
and that's the lead in, and then you tell them, if you say I'm a DJ, unfortunately, people have a lot of bad stereotypes about DJs that I was not really aware of when I first used to start telling people I'm a DJ, because I was quite proud of being a
Hmm.
DJ, because I thought it was the best job in the world. I still think that. But the reason I think it's the best job in the world is because, like, I mean, you don't have to do it, but I mean, you can create a total persona.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
and,
Look
and
at what's his name? The mouse, Maus.
the US,
Uh,
yeah, mouse, yeah.
uh, not Dormouse. Oh, jeez. Anyway, he wears this sort of crash helmet with the big white ears on.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that guy. Who is he? I don't know. I don't think you would ever know, even if you were to sit next to him on the bus every day for your
Right.
entire life. You would never know it was him.
Right.
But as soon as he steps out on Dead Mouse, thank you. As soon as he steps on stage, you know you're at a Dead Mouse concert.
Right.
Yeah, you know that yeah, this is happening. Anyway, what you said reminded me of a Tick quote. Man, I dig your crazy mouth music. Anyway, so yeah, but you're right. It is. There are so many. What's the word you used? Myths. So many things that people think. Baggage or whatever.
Yeah.
When I told my sisters that I was DJing, without anything else being conveyed, she got it into her head that I was now worth money.
That you're now what?
Worth money.
Oh wow. Okay.
And
So
it
I
was like,
was
okay,
DJ.
yeah, but I'm sure you can identify this because I'm sure you've well, I know you've been more heavily involved professionally with this than I have over the years. Even though I made my first DJ debut in a small nightclub in 1979. So yeah, we've both been doing it for a very long time.
Yep.
It's gone from something whereby, yeah, every club has a DJ, and occasionally they might get a guest DJ in, and he'll get paid a little bit more than the house DJ, but it's still a working man's job.
Yeah,
And you've
sure.
gone from that sort of situation where it was just a job, yeah,
Right.
to football star type status some of these DJs have. Yeah, and they will earn more for one single gig than most people will see in 5 years.
Oh, I know. It's obscene. I used to be, when I was young, man, I had those sorts of ambitions. One of my idols, I still to this day don't like him as a person, but Howard Stern as a career model was something that I was
Yeah,
interested in because he basically started not just a few years before me, really, and went in
yeah,
on a trajectory that I hitherto would have thought was impossible. But
yeah.
I
Right place, right
he
time.
he made exactly he made me realize that if you prepared to do what he did, that there is money to be made and fame to be had. And I was super ambitious when I was younger. I wanted to be rich and famous.
I still do.
And well, I don't really want either of those things now.
Well, the reason I want the riches is so that I can make things easier for my son bringing up my grandson, because
Sure.
I don't want him to have to go through the sort of shit that I had to do just to make sure that you know um, well,
We
yeah.
all want the next generation to be easier in
So
our life,
so yeah, so exactly. I mean that's my only motivation for that. And as far as the fame goes, I say that tongue in cheek because I already have a platform. Those that care to listen to me will. Those that don't won't, and it's as simple as that.
Well, I'm gonna be a famous artist, but it's gonna have to wait for a while after I'm dead, because that's how it works. That's how it
I've
works.
I have
Nobody
laid
knows
I've
pennies.
laid a
So
Yeah, I've laid a few eggs in that direction as well.
yeah,
I should probably not get musical fame until somebody like, the 22nd century's version of John Peel,
right.
um, who will possibly be the reincarnation of Terry Wogan. Um, I'm glad you get that one.
Yeah, yeah. But
Um,
I like the John Peel reference better. I mean, John Peel was an actual legend that many, many, many bands literally owe their career to. I mean, these
Yeah, you're not kidding.
not many DJs that can say that. When John Peel died, I was like actually sad, and that doesn't normally happen about people I don't know. But
Yeah.
I thought, oh, that's the end of a freaking era when John Peel died.
There's one other DJ that I would put in the same category, and that's David Rodigan.
I don't know who that is. Yeah.
You should look him up. He did for reggae what John Peel did for indie and electronica.
Oh, electronica. John Peel used to play death metal on the BBC One when no one else
Oh
would
yeah,
play.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah. Okay, I didn't mean to limit him to those two genres.
I mean, he would play anything though. That's the beauty of John Peel. And he was like, you know, this might be the next new thing, so I'm going to play it, and he would do it. And it might not be the next new thing too. You know,
I stand corrected. Yes,
you know,
I didn't mean to restrict the man.
yeah.
It was just, you know, for brevity, trying to come up with a couple of genres at short notice to counterpoint David Rodigan doing it for reggae and Jamaican artists.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, I mean, like, I don't know. One thing that's interesting is that how different the music scene is in the UK. I mean, I didn't used to think it was until I lived in the UK, because in America, we got so much English music, or so I thought. You know, because when I was a little boy, you had the original British invasion, the Beatles, the Who, you know, the Kinks, and on and on and on and on. David Bowie, Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, blah 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 blah. It never ends. It never ends. It never ends. And you know, the Moody Blues, it never ends. It never ends. And then it just started to end in the late 70s, and then you had the punk thing happen, and then you had the new romantic thing happen in the late 70s, early 80s, and electronica and all that thing. And so it was just like, you know, Duran Duran, and it's never ended. And so I always thought that the British music scene was like, I thought Americans, we liked a lot more British music than it turns out we actually like. Because when I lived there in the 90s, there's a whole bunch of things going on American radio that was not happening on British radio at all. So it doesn't work the other way around.
No,
y'all don't import anywhere near as much American music as we seemed to import British music, but that's not true either, because we only import like the select little nuggets, like the Duran Durans, and you know what I mean? There's a whole bunch of stuff going on in British music that we weren't even aware of. You know?
The way that works is you have the national music scene, and you get a certain cream of that raises to the top, and those are the ones that get shaved off and exported.
Right.
Yeah, that's why I'm perfectly aware of people like Mariah Carey, Bouncy Knowles, Tupac, Jay-Z, and Justin Bieber, and all of these that have floated across, because they are A-list.
Right.
Now, as soon as you get down to the B, C, D, and E lists, I haven't got a freaking clue.
Right.
Yeah. The only exceptions to those, to that general rule, will be when it comes to genre-specific material. Like, there's very few blues bands that originated in the UK.
Right.
So all of our blues has more or less been imported from you guys. I'm trying to think of another example, one that goes the other way. I was going to use Motown as an example, but you guys have Motown. We have what's called Northern Soul,
right?
Which is very similar to Motown, but it's not Motown.
No.
That's Jerry and the Pacemakers, Ferry Across the Mersey, things like that.
Sure.
Which some of the American audience may have heard of, because I think they made it to the A-list.
Yeah, Jerry and the Pacemakers had a couple of hits in America, for sure.
Yeah, and that's the other thing as well. It tends to be the A-list hits as well, the A-grade hits that make it across. Because I'm sure, well, probably not to you, not only because you're a DJ, but also because you've lived over here. But I think the vast majority of the American audience, I could name probably several albums worth of Beatles hits that they've never heard of.
Yeah, sure.
You know,
But
likewise, coming the other way, J.J. Cale, for example, I probably know 2, maybe 3 of his, and you could give me albums worth.
I was interested to find out when I came to America to visit in 97 and again in 99. And so at that point in the UK, Robbie Williams was at his zenith, right, of his popularity, of his After Take That sort of solo career. And
Yeah.
I couldn't find a single American who heard of Robbie Williams. And that blew my mind. I'm like, what do you mean you don't know who Robbie Williams is? It blew my mind. And so it makes you realize that even sometimes the people who do rise to the top maybe only get the 1 or 2 songs like Angel or whatever that goes across, and their whole albums never really did it over there like they did in the UK. Because Robbie Williams, I still don't know if he ever made it over here or not. You know what I mean? I really don't know.
Which raises the question, did he ever express the interest to export?
Well,
and if the answer's no, then that would explain a lot.
Well, Sony signed him. I remember this happening because I saw him on the television go, I don't know how to say this. I'm rich, because they signed him for an 80 million quid 5-album deal. So if they weren't planning on exporting him across to America, they were banking on a pretty big British market then. I don't know. But
no. Thing with Sony, a lot of, and this we're sort of creeping back to YouTube here. This is something that a lot of YouTubers who click on something and it's like blocked in your country, yeah, and the reason it's blocked a lot of times is because Sony owns it,
right?
Yeah, and the reason why it's blocked in that country is because Sony has got exclusive marketing deals set up for that, and a lot of the stuff that Sony's market, even though they're a Japanese company, is Germany.
Right.
That's where Sony HQ is. That's because it's their base of operations. It's where the largest share of their consumer base is. And that's why you'll find more Germans than anybody else are pissed off with the blocked in your country.
Right. I'm sure that's true. All right, I'm going to move on with my list of questions here again, Brian. Now, you might have to think about this question for a moment. And while you do think about it, I'm going to get another glass of water. So
okay.
What do you reckon is the worst mistake you've ever made? All right, give that some thought and I'll be right back.
Okay. And because we've got people watching, I'm probably going to have to think out loud. Otherwise, they're going to get bored just watching the gears turning behind my eyes. Not that you can see into my eyes right now. The worst thing that I've ever done. Worst thing. That was the question, wasn't it? The worst thing that I've ever done.
No, the biggest mistake you've ever made.
Oh, the biggest mistake I ever made. The biggest mistake that I've ever made. Again, this is one of those questions that could go one of 2 ways, depending on.
If you're like me, you've got so many mistakes to choose from. It's hard to decide which one's the biggest. But I mean, like, that's just me.
Yeah. Well, looking at my actual life from this vantage point, I like who I am now. I like where I am now. And if I learned anything from sci-fi at all, it's how fragile the timeline is. So I wouldn't actually want to change anything.
But you can still recognize a mistake.
Yeah. Well, hang on.
That's not relevant. You know, you don't have to
hang on.
it.
Well, a mistake would imply something you would do different.
Would it? I think it just implies that you know that you'd made a decision that you suffered for.
Exactly.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that you.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Oh, in that case, that questions. In that case, questions?
Because it's not necessarily implying regret about the mistake, Brian. It's just recognize
Okay.
that you made a mistake. Like shit. Like the other night,
Okay.
when
All right.
I was
With
interviewing Sword Sage the other night, and he didn't want to elaborate, and I can respect that. But he said, when he got married was the biggest mistake he ever made. And yeah, that's
okay. With that caveat,
yeah.
to fix my answer, I would probably say the biggest mistake I ever made was leaving school when I did.
What? How old were
Be-
you?
I was 16. And the reason I say that's a mistake is because effectively it robbed me of all of the um, it robbed me of the path that I would have taken in academia had I stayed.
Okay.
Um, as a result, I still don't have my degree. I've tried numerous times to kickstart it off and have always got so far and then had to abandon it to take care of life, basically. So that's one. Not a regret, as I said, because my life turned out the way it did. I had the experience that I've had, and I am the place where I am now, with who I am now, where I am now. So I could not be happier. But the other reason why it was a mistake is because had I not left school when I did, as I said, my life would have taken a very different course,
Sure.
and I could very well be sitting in a prominent role somewhere with actual effect on the world, um, resulting from the decisions that I make.
Right.
I don't know whether that would have been in the military, academia, or the church, but it would have been probably down one of those avenues.
You said your dad was in the RAF. Was there ever any
Yes,
pressure on you to join the services?
no pressure, but I came one interview away from being AWOL.
Oh wow.
I was going to join the RAF, and had I turned up for that last appointment, I was in.
Right.
Um, um, but I realised, as badly as I wanted to fly, and my dad did give me that experience when I was a child, not only taking me up in things like gliders and tiger moths and planes of that ilk,
Right.
but he actually gave me the controls, and
Cool.
I am the only person I know that did a loop the loop at something like 8 to 10,000 feet in a glider at the
Wow.
age of 8. I'm
Wow.
the only person
That's
I
hell of a
know that's
rush.
ever done that.
That must be hell of a rush. That's all I
It
can.
was, it was, and I've wanted to do it ever since. Um, you know, um, so yeah, um,
Well, I mean, the
that was that. So no pressure, but I came that close to doing it. And the reason I changed my mind is, as badly as I wanted to fly, and it's an ache that I still have, if there is any regret on my deathbed, is that I never did get a pilot's license. I never
fair enough.
did fly. Um, but the reason I didn't was because, bad as that is, I could not justify the things that I would have had to do in the Air Force to make that happen. Um,
And that's a reasonable calculation to make. You know what I mean? You don't want to have to wonder, have I ever killed anyone? You know.
even worse. My father, he knows that he did things where people died,
Right. Right.
and now looking back on history with the benefits of hindsight, he questions some of his involvement in that,
Sure.
particularly when it comes to things like, for example,
Right.
targets that turned out to be civilian installations and not what they were purported to be when they were targets.
Yeah. Wow. I don't even know.
That
I don't know how you could how as any human being, your dad or any other pilot, how they
I don't know how
reconcile
you.
their
Yeah,
head and heart. You know what I mean? It's got to be a
yeah.
tough because on the one
You
hand,
can't.
you were just following orders, and on the other hand, you need to be able. You wanted to be able to rely on getting the correct targets. You
Yeah.
know,
But
you know,
this
yeah,
is why following Nuremberg, I was just following orders, is insufficient defense. And it's also why in both your military code and ours, you have that provision that you are not required to execute an order that you find to be or reprehensible or believed to be illegal.
right. And the problem with that, as far as I know, is it's also true in the military that interpreting orders from a superior officer can be considered insubordination.
It can also be considered showing intuition, not intuition. What's the word? Show initiative.
Right, right.
But
So, so
that
tricky
is so
one, right?
dependent on how it turns out.
Yeah, the result of your decision is going to
Is
decide
what's
whether or not
counted.
whether it was right or
Yeah,
not. It depends on the result.
yeah, and that again is just so wrong.
Okay, this is another question, Brian, that you might find you need to take a moment or two to reflect on. And
Okay,
um, as I say to everybody, most of us are pretty decent people and we try to be pretty honest most of the time, but we've all told lies in our lives, no matter who you are.
I've been waiting for this one. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, right. So, what do you reckon is the worst lie you've ever told?
Yeah, I knew this was coming, and I still don't actually have an answer for it ready.
I'll dance while you think.
Yeah, yeah, dance, monkey, dance.
Dance, monkey, dance.
Oh, let me think. So, was it the biggest lie or the worst lie? It's the
The
biggest lie.
worst lie.
The worst lie.
You just reminded me of something, though, as an
I
aside. Think about that while you're thinking about it. You reminded me of a Chris Ross joke. He says, who tells the worst lies, men or women?" And he said, "Men lie the most. Women tell the worst lies. Men lie the most, like, of course I was just out with my friends, and women tell the worst lies, like, of course it's your baby." Anyway, carry on.
oh oh that is yeah. Hmm. Um. I think probably the worst lie I've ever told is one that I've told to myself. Um, and I actually had it then before you went into your anecdote. I just completely flushed it. Um, so let me just try and get back onto that train of thought.
You were talking about how you lied to yourself and the word that you
Yeah.
reckon. Yeah. And
Yes. That's right. I've got there. I have recaptured that thought. The the worst lie I've told to myself was it was one of my earliest long-term relationships, and I got the feeling that I was being cheated on, and I told myself that at some point she's going to talk to you about it. We're going to discuss it. We'll get it through. I even, opened the door for it on numerous occasions, only to be sort of met with "Don't be stupid," or "How could you think?" and all this sort of stuff. So I questioned myself on it. But yeah, push came to shove, and 6 months or so later, I sort of came to my senses, as it were, and realised, yeah, this is never going to happen. So I let myself be open to a dalliance, we'll call it, with a friend of mine that had been sort of simmering off and on and hadn't actually gone anywhere because I was involved and yada yada yada. And I let it happen. Um, 3 days later, I went home and, as always, maintained that I would. Um, Opened the conversation, told her all about it. You know, was as upfront as you can possibly be. You know, and then spent the next 3 days as her confession inched out just a little bit at a time. Uh,
Do you think she would
I
have confessed if you hadn't had a story to confess with first?
I don't think I ever would have known. No,
Right, right.
she never would have told me ever. And to be honest, even though we had that, I still don't think I know the full of it.
Right.
Um, but then getting back to the worst lie I ever told myself, I then told myself a lie that we would get over it. And what ended up happening was we stayed together for about a year after that. And in the back of my mind, I guess I always knew that I was just doing it because she had a complete emotional, psychological breakdown after that. Because, no, I'll just put it bluntly, because of the guilt, that she felt over what she had done, how it had happened, how she completely betrayed the um, bargain of honesty and trust that is implicit within a relationship. And I hadn't, even though I had cheated on her, and it had been the first to come through. Anyway, long story short, she uh, she got stress-induced alopecia. Her hair fell out, all of that, and it took a year, maybe a year and a half, for her to get her confidences back and move on, as it were. And because I'd lied to myself when that did happen, even though I knew it was gonna, it hit me, and it hit me as though um, we'd been going along in just a regular relationship, and it hit me the way that it would have originally hit me had her infidelity been the one that burst in and fucked us. And yeah, that's the worst lie I've ever told, and it was to myself, and it is what it is because of what it did to me at the end of the day.
Thank you for that story. It's a really interesting thing to explore because years ago on my channel, do you remember? It must be about 5 or 6 years ago, Brian, and there was a what's it called? Is it called Ashley Madison website? Um, got rumbled, and Ashley Madison was a website that's basically where married people hooked up with other married people. Okay,
Oh,
and
yes, yes.
yeah, and long story short, they got held hostage, and someone said they were going to release all the details of the people on the site to the, you know, because they were
I do kind of remember this, yes.
they were acting unscrupulously. And I'm not going to reiterate the whole thing, but basically, as this happened, a lot of people were like, "Good, I hope all these people do get busted for their affairs." And here's my thing, man. Honestly, I've been on all three sides of the infidelity triangle. I've been the guy your woman's cheating with. I've been cheated on, and I've cheated on my woman. So I've been on all three sides, right?
I'm just trying to think. I've been on at least two of those.
Sure,
I'm not sure about the third.
fair
I'll have to
enough.
think on that,
But my whole thing is
but
like
it's possible.
people were gloating about it, going, "Oh, now all these people are going to get their comeuppance, and they're going to, their partners are going to find out that they're cheating, and this is going to be so great." I mean, hang on a minute. That assumes that people want to find out their partner is cheating, for one thing. I mean, don't get me
Yeah.
wrong. If you're in a dishonest relationship, ultimately and in the long run, you might be better off knowing that you're in a dishonest. But I mean, some people tell themselves comfortable lies on purpose because that's the only way they can get through their day. And I'll tell you an example. I used to be acquainted with a couple in Cornwall, and I lived in the smallest town in Britain. That's not an exaggeration. I lived in St. Just, and there was a fellow there who I will change the name of. His name was Roger, and he was married to a girl whose name I'll also change, called Cherie. Small town, so I got to change the names. Anyway, Cherie worked with my wife at the time, and she was a nice lady, and her husband was a nice man, and they seemed to have a nice marriage. But he was at the pubs 7 nights a week.
Mhm.
He'd go home, kiss his wife, have dinner, hit in the pub. He'd pull at least once a week. At least once a week, he'd pull some random bird in a pub. Everybody knew him. Everybody knew he was married, and everybody knew his wife. His
And
wife
yet they
his
still
wife
went
got
home with
married,
him.
and it's the smallest town literally in Britain. And yet his wife either didn't know or didn't care. Somehow no one fucking told her about this affair. And I think that's because when you ever saw them together, they were like super duper in love. They were the cutest couple you ever saw. And so I think people just
Yeah.
didn't want to pop her bubble, didn't want to be the one, you know what I mean? So these
Yeah.
things are complicated, right? And so when
I
this
thought you were going to go somewhere else with that, but yeah.
no, it's just this whole thing is like this thing about when people rejoice about other people getting busted for infidelity. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah,
Sometimes
it's
you,
I've
yeah,
been cheated on. It's not fun. It's not fun.
it's not.
You
It's
know,
not. It's not.
but at
But
the end of the day,
there's
yeah,
also another side to that coin as well, you know. Infidelious, I don't know if that's a word or not, but it is now. Um,
right. Shit,
infidelious, yeah,
out.
exactly. Um, those types of relationships, they're not always founded in deceit, especially this day and age. I know I was in a marriage of this caliber, whereby fidelity is not expected. You know, you have your partner's permission, nay, encouragement, yeah, to
Wow.
sleep around, yeah. The logic being, I love you so much. Why would I want you to keep all of your goodness, all of your skills, all of your whatever to myself? I want other women to share this, yeah. And you know, likewise on the other side
I wish I had
type
that
thing.
personal
Now,
security to be able to do that, but I don't.
well, yeah, security in in yourself and your sexuality is something that you have to work on. It's not something that comes easy. It's not something that comes naturally. Not to everybody.
I
Now,
for
I
me,
am,
for me personally, I've just been cheated on too many times. That's it. I cannot cope with this. I personally can't cope with the idea that I'm competing with someone. That's it in a nutshell. That's
yeah,
my
I get that.
if that's my failing. That's my failing. But that's my
Yeah,
psychology.
yeah. See, I process it slightly differently to that. Yes, I've been cheated on, and I have cheated. And the way I process it is, okay, the 7 year itch is a known thing. People getting bored is a known thing. The unexpected, wow, who are you? And where did you come from? Yeah,
Mhm.
is a known thing. So, in a world where these things are not only possible, plausible, but probable,
Right.
the only way to really have a sane relationship with somebody is to have honesty in those situations. That's why, for example, in the first story that I told, the third person to know about any of this was my partner at the time. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, that's the way my instincts have told it always should be. That's the way my ethics and value system tells me I should behave. Um, and yeah, every fiber of my being tells me that I cannot be any other way, particularly with somebody that I care about.
Hmm.
Yeah. The very minimum that I owe them is that level of honesty. So yeah, here we go. Yeah, Mike, he's living the 7-year itch now. Um, so yeah. Now where was I? So yes, that's kind of how I processed it. And when I went into this marriage, um, again, we met on the internet. Um, different circumstances. This was a dating site. Yeah. So the expectations that we had from each other going into the relationship were different.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's all about it. You know, this is
But
this is
the
why
point,
why the Ashley Madison
the
thing.
crux,
The point you're making, though, Brian, as far as I can tell, is that different couples have different arrangements, and it would be wrong for someone to just assume what those arrangements are from the outside
that's
looking.
part of it. That's part of it. It does actually have a punchline, this. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. At the end of the day, yeah, even with the honesty, even with all that we've just discussed, yeah, you can still come home one day, yeah, after having left to go to work in the morning and everything is as it should be, yeah, come back 8 hours later, yeah, to find a note on the table, some significant holes all around the house, and a letter that reads, Dear Brian, I have left you, plus filler, yeah. Yeah, so at the end of the day, there are no guarantees when it comes to the longevity of a relationship and whether
Yeah.
or not it is going to fuck you over.
Yeah.
So
And
again, even with all of that said, the marriage I have now, the relationship I have now, yeah, the American woman that I snuck over your border and stole out from under your noses that lives with me now is the happiest I've ever been. And
I'm super glad to hear that.
I would not change a single second of the life that I've lived that got me to this point where I can say that
Yeah, that's
about
pretty cool.
a very special, very beautiful person.
Yeah, that's awesome. And
No, exiled was not the punchline. Not of that story.
she was the denouement of after the
Yeah,
punchline.
yes, yeah.
Anyway,
And I can tell you why she's so frowny because yeah, she's cool. Um, yeah, this was my marriage that I had to get a divorce in order to be able to marry her.
oh, I
And
didn't realize you had unfinished business when you and X got together. Yeah.
well, it was finished, and as it turned out, when I went and applied for the divorce, I learned that I was already divorced,
Right.
so it worked out great. So yeah, she had already divorced me, and I had been absolutely none the wiser.
Right. Fair enough. Okay,
How she
moving.
managed it, I don't know, but it happened.
All right. The next question is kind of the flip of the last question.
Okay.
What do you think is your proudest achievement, and offspring can't be included in that answer?
I know, I know. I remember that and grimacing when you asked Raven. The thing that I am most proud of. Oh yes, I can tell you exactly what that is. During the 90s, as I said, I had a wheelchair phase, and prior to that, I had a bedridden phase. And when I was sort of crossing from one phase to the other, I met a woman called Sally Becker, who some of you may know. You may know her because she was big in the newspapers in the 90s while you were here.
Hmm.
Uh, otherwise known as the Angel of Mostar.
Okay.
And I got heavily involved in the project that she was doing at the time, following the Mostar stuff. And I basically developed resources and a website for her, so that when she went into Kosovo during that crisis,
Right.
um, not only were we getting news from the ground in a war-torn area up onto the internet within literally as little as an hour of it being taken. This is the 90s, yeah,
Yeah.
early internet. All right, before YouTube, before Facebook, before all of the social media, yeah, that happens now. I was even doing it before CNN were doing that sort of stuff. Um, anyway, so yeah, doing that. And when she was captured, the British government used that website to keep tabs on exactly where she was, so that when she was captured, they knew exactly how and where to negotiate with the Serbs to get her released. Had it not been for that, this woman would probably have been disappeared by Milosevic's government,
Wow.
for the heinous crime of getting sick and injured children out of an active war zone. So
Wow.
that is the thing that I am most proud of, having done that for her.
That's awesome. Hang on a second. I've lost you. Hang on. Sorry, I'm doing three things at the same time there.
Yeah, no worries. So yeah,
That's
that is the thing that I'm most proud of.
that is pretty cool. So yeah, okay. I'm moving right along here. Now you obviously have seen this part of the interview, so you probably know the next question coming up. You can pretend that I'm a genie, and I am going to grant you, Shazam, three wishes. However, only two wishes can be for you. One wish has to be not for you. Go.
Two wishes for me. Well, the first wish for me would be to be able to wave away my mother's Alzheimer's.
Yeah, that's a good one.
My second wish for me, I'll have to come back to. The third wish, I would give that to my grandson, with the caveat that he can only use it when he hits 30.
So you get to give one free wish, but you got to wait till you're 30.
Yeah. And I suppose my second wish, I would probably give that to my son. There you go.
So basically, you gave away all three wishes. Good on you.
No, I didn't. The first one was most definitely for me, because I don't know how how to handle my mother's Alzheimer's, and
Right.
it's only going to get worse, and my ability to deal with it is only going to get worse. So I
Yeah,
want that
I
situation gone.
my heart really goes out. I don't even. Wow. Yeah. I wish there was. They keep saying that they're getting closer to cures and treatments and so on, but as far as I hear,
It's looking promising, but there's none of it being used in the field, as it were.
right, right.
It's not available. It's not available to the people that need it, that desperately need it. And I'm not kidding when I say I really do not know how I'm going to handle it when she doesn't know who I am.
Right. It's one of my most terrifying things to contemplate, not for my own parents, but for me as a parent to my own children. What if that happens to me?
Yeah,
It's just like,
it is one of the most cruel afflictions ever.
yeah. Well, I mean, years
My
ago.
my grandfather had it as well,
Oh, wow.
but fortunately for me, I was one of the few people that he always recognised, even towards the end.
Mm,
So, and that's why it's going to be so much harder when it's my own mother. Not only is she closer to me emotionally, even though he is a firm, a firm foundation in grounding my character, who I
mm.
am as a person. Um, she gave birth to me, and for her not to know who I am, that's something that I'm not sure. I don't.
Well,
I've dealt with the death of a daughter. I do not know how I am going to deal with this. I
right.
just
Wow.
don't.
Well, I don't know either, to be honest. I don't know how I would handle
Yeah.
it. All I
So
know,
that's what
all I know
that's
is, because it's the whole thing of like someone's basically dying before they're dead, and it's
yeah.
yeah,
So that wish is most definitely for me.
hmm.
Okay,
Yeah,
it's got the it's got the implication that it's also for her as well, because it saves her having to go through that. Um, and it's also for everybody else that she knows and loves, because they're not going to have to go through it either. But primarily, that is for me.
you've mentioned that you've had to deal with the death of a daughter. Would it be too hard for you to talk about that?
No, not really. It's one of those things that talking about it actually helps. And not
So,
only does it help me deal with it.
did you have in total then?
Sorry.
How many kids have you had in total?
Uh, Two that I know for certain are mine.
Right, right, yeah,
And there's a possibility that there may be one other, but I've not been told about it.
right,
So as far as I'm concerned, no. All I have is, my best friend growing up threw at me one day. I think it was, he was trying to throw a barb at me for some reason, but he alluded to the fact that he'd seen yada yada, and uh, yeah. So on his word, because it's him, I give it some credence,
right,
but
right.
because of the way it was thrown, I tend to think, no, it was a throwaway jab.
Right, right. One of those things.
Yeah,
So and so's kid looks just like you, that kind of thing.
that
Right.
kind of thing. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Even though I had a relationship with so and so.
Right. Right. Right.
So yeah.
So how long ago was that when your daughter died, and how old was she when she died?
It would have been 2002, and she was minus 2 months when she died.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
That's okay. She didn't make it to the breathing world,
Right.
unfortunately. Um, it's something that I don't mind talking about because it's it's a reasonably rare condition, but
Hmm.
the number of people that there are on this planet, um, numerically, there are an awful lot of instances. So I'm definitely not alone as a parent having to deal with this and go through this. It is a genetic um, failure.
Right.
They call it left heart syndrome. And basically, what it is in a nutshell, the left side of the heart doesn't develop.
I see.
And basically, what they have to do as soon as a child is born, they have to immediately go in with open heart surgery and put in a little baby sized heart. Then they have to do the same thing at 3 months.
Wow.
And then they have to do the same thing again at 3 years. And then you're good until you hit puberty in your teens. And then you have another one, which is your adult heart, as it
Adult
were.
heart. Right. Wow.
Yeah. And she died, I say minus 2 months, a month and a bit
Right.
before she was due. She should have been with us at Christmas, and she was stillborn in November.
Right.
So, yeah.
That's got to be
Um,
really hard. I'm sorry to hear that, man. I don't even know
hey,
how I would cope with that. You were talking about the cope with your mom's Alzheimer's, but I'm not sure which would be harder, at least in the moment. The Alzheimer's thing, though, that's an ongoing thing.
yeah,
Whereas I think this one thing is an event which you can then process and try to come to terms with. Whereas Alzheimer's is it's also a process, and you're never able to come to terms with it because it's constantly getting worse.
it hits you hard when you are given the diagnosis,
I'll bet.
or rather the prognosis, and that happens with the first, first scan. I forget how many weeks it is, and from then onwards, you get more scans, and they keep an eye on it, and more tests while they diagnose it. So we knew from the as early as you can what it was that we were having to deal with.
Mm.
We were told to seriously consider um, aborting her, um, which we did, and we came to the conclusion, both of us, that we would give her the best opportunity that she could have for a life if she wanted it.
Mm.
And I say if she wanted it, knowing full well that there's going to be people out there going, yeah, how could a fetus want anything? Um, but here's the thing. You hear so many times, oh, he's a fighter, she's a fighter. She got through this, she's battled beyond all the odds, and she's alive despite the medicine and the medical opinion saying, yeah, sorry love, you've only got 5 years. 15 years later, still going strong, all of that stuff. And I don't think there's enough credit given to the impetus of the human will to survive.
I
Yeah,
couldn't agree more.
the potency of that. I mean, I myself, uh, 30 years ago, I was told my liver would pack up on me within 2 weeks. It
Wow.
nearly did, but it didn't, and I'm still here.
Right.
So for the last 30 years, yeah, um, by some people's metric, I shouldn't be here, but I am. Deal with it.
I,
But
I, I'm, I,
but
I, I agree with you totally, Brian. The will to live, the fire to not let yourself be beaten by whatever malady you might have
yeah,
counts for so much. You can't overstate it.
yeah, and on a biochemical level as well, when you've got a fetus that is developing, yeah, you've
Mm.
got all of that biochemistry, and it's essentially the same thing expressed in chemistry.
Sure.
Yeah, because what are we if not the sum total of what emerged from the biochemistry that is us? Yeah. So
Yep.
we decided that we would give her the best fighting chance that we could.
Mm.
And when it came to it, the November that she died, um, first was the Branston Hicks. We thought, okay, this is probably one of those phantom um, uh, phantom contractions, that sort of stuff. So we went in and we were told, no, everything's fine, go home. And the following day it happened again, only they asked us to stay this time. And they ran some tests, double checked, cross checked, double checked again. And then they broke it to us that she was she was dead. She had
I'm
gone.
so sorry.
Um, Now with Heather, the thing was with left heart syndrome. Um, as I said, the left side of the heart doesn't develop.
Hmm.
With her, the left side hadn't developed at all,
Right. So it was
and
basically
the right side was woefully insufficient. She essentially had no heart of her own. She certainly had nothing that would function as a heart.
and that must have been pretty easy to spot while the gestation period was happening, because the heartbeat's one of the
Yeah,
first things that happens when
yeah. But
like
it's also one of the reasons why it took so long for them to diagnose her as gone,
right.
because there was no easy things. So, um, my thought is that they had to actually literally try and detect blood flow, any sort of blood flow. And then they had to compensate for the fact that it was being driven by the mother's blood flow
Mm.
through the placenta,
Sure, sure.
and all of these things that they had to calculate and make adjustments for. But the one thing that does come as a relief, it was a relief at the time, and it has helped me deal with it since, is the fact that there was no trace of distress in the amniotic fluids.
Good. Yeah.
And that indicates that at whatever level, and I am going to anthropomorphize this because it's my daughter, so fuck you if you object to it. She basically made the decision, no.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing. If things aren't working, that's when miscarriages and stillbirths happen, is because it's not the right time. It's not ready.
Yeah.
Everything's not working. Moving on from that just
So
slightly,
anyway,
though.
yes. So that
So,
was that.
so you've got a son as well, and
I have a son.
was your son born
Yes.
before or after that?
Yes, my son was born in '92.
Okay.
He's going to be 30 this year.
Right.
And I'm going to be 60 this year, so there's a nice little symmetry there.
Mm.
Especially when you consider that I'm 30 years older than my dad as well. So 30, 30,
Yeah.
30.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, my grandson breaks that mold, but whatever. Um,
Oh well.
it's my son's fault for being impatient. Anyway, what was the question?
Oh, I was just asking. About, that's it. You basically answered it. Just about whether he's older, younger, how old was he, and all that.
Yeah.
So getting on with my list here, Brian, and getting on to hopefully a more levity, because it's a bit dark when we
Yeah,
talk
we
about.
went a bit dark, didn't we?
Yeah.
But
So
we
is
can
there
go
anything,
darker if you want.
that's fine. I think we need that's it's a bit early on a Sunday.
Lighten it up. Okay.
Yeah. But what would you like? Is there anything about yourself that you would change if you could? I mean, if I had a magic wand, or if you had a magic wand, and you could go, what would you change?
Yeah, one thing, my ability to grow sideburns. I would like one, please.
That's pretty funny. Okay, now that's nice and simple.
Well, the reason for that is because without the bits up the side, I can't grow a full beard. Damn it! I'm stuck with a goatee. That's it. Goatee and a soul patch.
Fucking beefcake.
Yeah, exactly. Not my fault. Yeah, not a choice.
That's pretty funny. All right.
So there you go. That's the one thing that I would change.
All right. Okay. So here we go. Now we're having a fantasy dinner party now, and it's going to be 8 people at the party, including yourself, and you can invite 7 other people from any time in history or whatever, and language is not a barrier. Who would you invite?
I would invite my grandfather because I've missed the old coot. And there's been an awful lot happening in my life that I would like to discuss with him. Carl Sagan, he would be on there. Sir Thomas Aquinas, that's 3.
I know that name from a famous quote, but I can't think of anything else I know about him except for one famous quote. What's up with Thomas Aquinas?
Thomas Aquinas was one of the early church fathers. and he is credited with the philosophy of thought along the lines of God wrote two books, reality and the Bible. And the Bible he did through men.
Right.
So if there's ever a disparity between the two, go to the original.
Right. Okay.
That's reality.
Yeah.
And that is the thing that you throw at anybody that says the Bible is inerrant. Sorry, no. Even the early church acknowledged that it has mistakes, and to fix those mistakes, you go to the original copy, which is reality.
Right. I like it.
Yeah. And
Okay. So
it's a philosophy that comes directly from the teachings of Christ.
right. That's pretty good. Yeah. So your grandfather, Carl Sagan, Thomas Aquinas. You got four.
That's three, isn't it?
Yeah. You
Who
got four
else?
more.
Oh yes, Aristarchus, because he was right, and Plato, fuck you for being politically more favoured in court. That's with regards to early science, heliocentric versus geocentric, and um, I think it was Aristarchus as well who was one experiment away from having a working theory of evolution.
Oh wow.
Yeah. All he needed to do was to have two fish and stick a glass bell jar over one of them and see that, or rather notice that the one with the bell jar over it did not get infested with maggots. Because the only flaw in his hypothesis was spontaneous eruption of life from dead matter.
Right. Okay.
And that was the only problem that he had left to solve. So that's number four. If that was Aristarchus that did both. If it's not, then technically it'd be five. But anyway, whatever. Five would have to be Tommy Cooper.
Tommy Cooper. Right.
Yeah,
That's
Tommy Cooper.
A famous British comedian for folks who don't know.
Yeah, and the reason for that is I actually watched him die on stage on the
Yeah.
telly.
You would have
And
to.
yeah, well, probably 2/3 of the country, if we're honest.
Right.
So yeah, and the reason why I'd like him at that dinner party is because I want to know how that act was supposed to have finished.
Right.
The man was a fucking comedy genius, and not only that, he's famous for always screwing up the tricks, but he was actually a very competent magician. Yeah. He could actually do some pretty impressive shit. So that's five. Two more. Two more. Think, Brian. Think. Well, I'd have exiled there, obviously. Duh.
There you go.
And my last guess, I think I will pass that on to her. Let her have somebody there that she would like. Or is that a cop out? Am I supposed to give her?
You could cop out if you want to cop out. You know, it's we're all going to tease you about it later. That's all.
All right. In that case, number seven would. Okay, here we go. Let's try with something controversial. It's a toss-up between Attila the Hun and the last shogun. I think it begins with T. the last Shogun dynasty in Japan. I forget his name. I
But
should know it.
Hirohito, I don't even know.
No. It begins. It definitely begins with T. But it was the last shogunate. It was the last powerful shogun in the crossover between ancient Japan and modern Japan.
Okay,
So
so
they went from a feudal sword wielding samurai culture into the full on industrial military complex that we know today. And they did it
okay, so
overnight.
I like it. So we've got. So what do you think? Who do you think would be the most interesting person? Two people's conversation to overhear, like Carl Sagan talking to Aristotle, or what? Or what? You know,
Carl Sagan talking to Aristarchus
yeah,
and or Thomas Aquinas.
right.
Because
The
I'm
two.
sure the three of them would exclude the rest of us most of the evening.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and
And I just want to eavesdrop.
yeah, sure. Right. No, I think it's interesting when asking people this types of questions, because some people will just list off a couple of people that they personally would like to meet, but then they're not really thinking about what those people are going to say to each other once they're at the
Mm,
same dinner party, you know? Um,
yeah,
so yeah, I think it's pretty good. All right.
yeah. I very nearly went with inviting Adolf to the party because I'm sure my grandfather and him would have an awful lot to say to each other.
Indeed. Well, I mean, see, to me, it would almost be more interesting to have a couple of people. I'm not so sure if Hitler would be one I would choose, but I mean, a couple of people who, because human thinking has changed over the centuries, for example, right? I mean, we don't
Mm.
necessarily think the same way as our
No,
ancestors.
that's why I've got a fair spread
Sure.
in mine.
I mean, like I've made this observation before on the live streams, but I mean, like as I contemplate history, it has not escaped my notice that the most successful in terms of longevity, the most successful regimes in the world have always been the most brutal and the most vicious and the most ruthless.
Well,
Ruthless
that
ruthlessness rules this world. And once I had that revelation, I've never been comfortable since. You know what
yeah,
I mean?
that's one of the reasons why I picked the Japanese guy
Right,
because he went from one ruthlessness to another ruthlessness.
right.
So he's seen the ancient and the new way of doing it, and I think his perspective on things would actually be fascinating. You
Indeed.
know,
Yeah, well, yeah, I think it's great. You don't think your wife would be uncomfortable being the only chick in a room full of dudes?
possibly, but I don't think it's ever bothered her before.
Yeah, right. Fair enough.
I could be wrong, and
Yeah,
I think she's in chat still, so she could clarify one way or the other.
yeah.
But if she doesn't want it to be a sausage fest, I'm sure there's
You could
any number of females I could swap in.
get Mrs.
Um,
Aquinas or whatever.
yeah, I mean Cleopatra springs to mind. Um, so does I forget her name. The chick that was in charge of the library at Alexandria. I forget her name.
Was that Nefertiti?
No, she was another Egyptian pharaoh.
Right. Okay.
Um, yeah, I've forgotten her name. Some Greek chick. Um, the oracle or one of the oracles from Delphi. Um, they'd be fascinating.
Indeed.
Queen Victoria. She'd be fascinating. Um,
Would you say if you could meet Queen Victoria, would you say what's up with the 40 years of mourning? I mean, come on, you know, right? I
uh,
mean,
no, I wouldn't because everybody mourns differently,
I grant you
and
that.
I've been mourning my daughter for over 10 years now already,
I suppose.
and
Yeah, yeah. Must
I can't. I, it It's not as intense, but it's never going to go. It's never going to disappear. So I will be mourning her for the rest of my life, however long that is. So I can fully understand Queen Victoria mourning the loss of the soulmate. I still mourn my cat, um, and that's an animal, for crying out loud.
No, I fully
Um,
understand, man. I mean, you're not wrong when you
so
say
if
everybody grieves differently. You know, it just seems like
oh, here we
40.
go.
You know,
She would have invited Frida Kahlo.
yeah.
So all right, so yeah, swap out Frida Kahlo for whoever. I should have seen that coming, actually. I should have seen that coming because
Right.
she's told me of her fascination with Frida Kahlo. So yeah, I'd actually thinking about it. Yeah, I'd probably invite her as well, just on the strength of that. As an artist in South America, not sure if
So
it's Mexico.
let me ask you another question, which is one I haven't asked everybody, but is let's just say that you found it, the DeLorean, right, with the time machine thing,
Oh, that DeLorean.
right?
Okay,
The DeLorean with the flux capacitor, and
where would I go?
it has exactly 2 vials of plutonium left, one to get where you want to go, and one to get you back to the present, right? Would you go forward or
Ooh,
backward, and where would you go?
I would definitely go forwards. I would definitely go forwards. Um, and I would. How far forwards? I don't know. I'll have to think on that maybe and come back to it. And on the going backwards trip, I think I would probably go back to the building of Stonehenge.
Just to see how the fuck they did it.
No, not to see, not to see how they did it, but to gain an insight of who the people were that did do it.
Hmm.
And I've got numerous reasons for doing so. Because I'm fascinated in how much culturally and socially speaking, how much of those original Britons still existed in my time, um, and how the ideas morphed, um, and partially so that I could answer a few questions to them from the future. What
Hmm.
those questions would be, I don't know, obviously. But yeah, I would like to be able to give some people that far back in time some idea of where it was they were headed.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty cool. And I too personally would probably opt if I had the choice of going forward or backward, but I had to only choose one. I'd probably go forward. Um,
Oh, if I could only choose one, then yeah, I would go forward.
yeah. I mean, once upon a time when people used to ask me, give you 3 wishes, what would one of your wishes be? One of my wishes used to be, I don't know if I'd still make it my wish, but one of my wishes used to be, I kind of want to find out. I would love to know what the ultimate fate of humankind is. I mean, do we just evolve into something else? Do we snuff ourselves out? Do we go extinct because of climate change? Do other animals, do our societies collapse and do other animals evolve past us? Do you know what I mean? I mean, there's so many different ways that
Yeah,
this whole.
that is something that I would be absolutely fascinated to see.
But
Another
you
speak
wouldn't know how far forward to go. That's the problem. How far forward do you have?
exactly,
Quarter of a million
exactly,
years?
exactly. But well, I don't think you'd have to go that far because I think the most likely candidates for what I'm about to propose are primates already.
Right.
Um, But the thing that fascinates me is how we as a species would deal with the emergence of another person type entity on this planet. And I think, unfortunately, sadly, I think I already know the answer.
Yeah, we'd wipe them
Um,
out.
we would wipe
We'd
them
wipe
out.
them out. That's the whole Planet of the Apes thing is unfortunately true. We'd wipe them
Yeah,
out, or we would try to wipe them out
yeah.
before they
We
had a
would
chance.
enslave them, realize it was a mistake, and then try and wipe them out.
Right. Yeah. One, two, three.
So
Just like that.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
So having made that realization, that kind of soured that question for me.
Yeah, sure.
So the next fascination would be okay, alien species. But again, you get the same response. Ultimately, we would try and wipe them out. And the only thing that would foil us is if they were technologically or otherwise superior to us and ended up enslaving us. And then it would be a fucking hell of a long road for us to
Sure.
reassert our rights and privileges as we know them today within that society. And I think that point might be an interesting one to visit.
Well, I've done a little bit of traveling around Europe. And when I was in Rome, there's one building there. I think I can't remember if it's called the Palladium or Palin, something like that. And it's got writing in Latin on the front of it that says this building was built by Marcus Aurelius in the year 150.
Yeah.
And it looks brand fucking new, right? I mean, okay, it's been cared for, granted, but it looks brand fucking new and it's almost 2,000 years old, right?
Marble
And
does that when you look after it well.
well, and here's the point I'm making. I mean, society, civilization, I should say, rather than society, civilization is in a constant state of rising and falling, you know. And sometimes civilization rises and rises and rises to great height and then falls. And I think to myself, I look back at the sort of scope of human history, and you know, the cities that we have on Earth right now. What's going to be left of them in 1,000 years? Just 1,000, much less 3 or 5, right? I mean, 1,000 years, because you look at buildings that, I mean, how many buildings there are in the world right now that have stood for over 1,000 years? And that's probably not that many. You know, there's a few. Tower of London's been there for 1,000 years, right? Just to give
Mhm.
an example. But I mean, it's not a lot. And not a lot of buildings last that long. Human beings don't tend to build things to last that long. So,
With one or two, yeah, air pollution does eat marble. That's why you have to be very, very careful in the way you look after it. What was I going to say? Yeah, the ability to build things that last a long time. I always come back to the pyramids, and this is something that we touched on a couple of dinner clubs ago. And that is the Great Pyramids of Egypt.
right,
Now, when we spoke about it last time, I mentioned that Cleopatra is historically closer to us
right,
than she is to the builders of those pyramids. And we are 2,000 years hence, give or take,
right from her.
from her. So it's over 2,000, probably closer to 3,000 years in the time between her and the builders of the pyramid.
Right,
And what you have to remember with that is that when she was pharaoh, when she was queen, that pyramid still had its
white alabaster.
shiny white alabaster surface. Yeah. So
Yeah,
that managed to survive 2 to 3,000 years
right,
of the ancients living there and forgetting how they built them.
sure.
And it's only in the 2,000 years since then, probably, I mean, I don't know, you'd have to find something in the records to say exactly how long that alabaster lasted before it crumbled. But you look at the state of them now, and you think, oh God, yeah, that looks 5,000 years old.
Right.
But it didn't for more than the first half of its existence.
Right. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, similar to the way you're talking about places, attached to the Vatican. Yeah. And yeah, it does begin with P, but I can't remember what it's called either. But yeah, so with regards to the pollution thing, yes, pollution does eat marble, but it has a much greater affinity for some of the other things that we've built that are architecturally similar to the stuff built in marble, using granite, limestone, stuff like
Sure.
that. And pollution eats into that shit a lot quicker and a lot better than it does to marble.
Yeah, I mean, limestone is
So
super perishable, for example. And that's why
yeah,
since the alabasters come off the pyramids, they aged a lot quicker because it's limestone
because
underneath
it's
all
limestone.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
and rain just dissolves that shit.
yeah. Fortunately, it doesn't rain a lot. Anyway,
No.
listen, Brian,
Now,
I think we've come
but
to a
it's
good
gonna again.
That's right. Yeah, but
Yeah.
the climate has changed there over the millennia. Right. I think we've come to a good spot to wrap the interview up, though, Brian.
Yeah, it's been fun.
So this is the point, though, where I toss it out to people in the audience. Is there anything that they might like to ask Brian?
Here
Some
we go.
burning, pressing questions. And even though CRB Vegas is not in the audience right now,
Oh, you have
I
a
know
question from him?
I know for sure he will ask you what your favorite ice cream is.
I don't really have a favorite, but if I was pushed, I would probably have to go with pistachio. And that's mainly because it's not widely available here, as you know.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there we go. Is anybody else in the chat got any questions for Brian that we can burden his mind with?
Oh, Deep Ashtray's there. Hey, Deep, how you doing? When will Brian be making another tour of the Americas? Well, now that we've got this end of the last got to this end of the last 5 years. Sorry, I put my glasses on so I can actually read. Now that we've got to the end of the last 5 years, and we are able to travel easier again. When it will be, I don't know, but I can tell you it will probably be to Florida because we have an American side of the family that we need to catch up with. So yeah, that would be our next trip. Whether it will be a tour, I don't know. I would love to hit Colorado again. I miss the mountains with a passion. I would also like to visit Texas as well, particularly the Texas desert, because that climate and I are best friends, BFFs. But I think another trip that we have to get in is Pennsylvania, because I've heard there's an awful lot of good campgrounds there, and hot springs and all that to take in. So yeah, that's the wheres, but when it'll be a case of putting the finances together to make it happen, really. And that's getting increasingly difficult, as everybody knows.
Yeah, traveling, especially right now, because of all the extra expensive imposed by COVID testing and everything else. I mean,
Yeah,
you can basically add $1,000 to whatever travel plans you might need to be
and
saving. you know.
that whole situation as well throws another wrench into the thing, because both of us technically are in the extra vulnerable group,
Right.
because both of our health con- conditions involve a certain level of immunodeficiency. So
Sure.
we have to be very careful. That's why we're spending so much time indoors, even though we're not officially under lockdown. We are under self-imposed isolation to a greater or lesser degree.
I'm similar because I live up on the mountain, and it doesn't seem worthwhile to spend 20 minutes going down when it's just you got everything you need. You know, it's just like, oh
I
no,
know, right?
yeah, it's just
You
like,
got, yeah, Colorado mountains. What more do you need?
yeah, yeah.
You
It's a
know, I
beautiful day
mean,
here, by the way. It's a beautiful
d-
day here, and like literally 15 minutes ago, I don't know if you saw me go like that, but I'm not sure if it was it wasn't an eagle, but some kind of massive bird of prey just flew right, like right at the window and by. I thought he was gonna fucking, thought it was gonna hit the window, but he didn't. But
oh, right, yeah.
yeah, big old bird
Pen-
of prey. I don't know what it was.
Pennsylvania's pretty, but not much for mountains. No, but it is good for lakes and forests, and that's the pull of that. Deep Ashtray asks, if you haven't already, would you go to grad school? I haven't actually been to a grad school per se. You weren't here when we were talking about education,
Hmm.
but had I continued the path that I was on, I would have probably ended up somewhere like Oxford or Cambridge. So that would have been one path my life took. Um, I have tried to do my degree um, several times, as we discussed earlier, again before you arrived. So the answer to that would be yes.
Fair enough. Okay, right. And last but not least, we've got Agent of Doubt.
Since when was reality real? um,
Who says it is? I know.
yeah, yeah. I was looking for that phrase. Thank you for finding it first. Um, with regards to the scientific method, the first um, the first tangible answer I can give you to that is the day that Descartes had the realization, cogito ergo sum. Oh, that was for Deep Ashtray. All right,
Yeah,
sorry.
see, we're
Yeah,
insufficiently philosophical to answer that question.
yeah,
It,
okay.
it, it falls on Deep Ashtray, who shaved off all his hair. So now we're bald twins.
Yes. So, you and I are probably going to have to discuss this at some point, Mike. But at one point, when did not having a PhD render one incapable of such deep conversation as philosophy, Mike?
I don't know.
Hmm?
I don't even know what philosophy really. I don't know very much about philosophy in the official sense, but I get accused of being a philosophizer all the time, so I don't really know. Speaking of philosophy, though, since we are,
Descartes be
um,
damned.
yeah. On Thursday, I've got an interview with Peter, whose YouTube channel used to be called Tool Time 9901, and I
Which
do
I remember.
and
That was a
I
good
do believe
show.
I do believe he majored in philosophy. So, that might be an interesting interview. We'll see.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
listen, so I want to thank you, Brian, for agreeing to do this interview, and
Thank
thank
you for
everybody.
having me.
Yeah, thank everybody in the chat as well for hanging out with us on this Sunday afternoon or Sunday
Can
evening for you.
I can I have a parting shot?
Plart,
A,
have that
a
shot.
parting shot? Yeah, for those that say, philosophy is for losers, and those that really cannot see a use for it, um, we're much better understanding how we think just as much as we are for understanding what we think. Because if you go through life just knowing things and thinking things without understanding how you got there, then you're fucked.
Well, it
It's as
doesn't get
simple
you.
as that.
Yeah.
It doesn't get you very where. The answer is bang the rocks together, guys.
You know what really cracks me up? I mean, like philosophy, Western philosophy tends to be derived from the Greek philosophers and then forward. But I mean, Eastern philosophy predates that by a long ways. And when you read into Eastern religion, well, Hindu religious texts, I'm thinking of in particular, I mean, they thought about all this shit like 3,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago, you know what I mean? And wrote it all down. Nothing's really changed. Human beings are not any different now than they ever were.
No, they're
And
not.
the same answers that it doesn't matter who you are. The thing I admire most about Indian culture is in Indian culture, and this has been true for 50 centuries, in Indian culture, it's perfectly reasonable and rational to decide to fuck off the world and go think.
Yep.
To just go, fuck you. I'm giving up everything. I'm going to go think. And
Yeah.
that's seen as a perfectly rational, reasonable
The closest
life choice.
Yeah, and the closest we've ever come to it in this civilization, this society, is fuck off. I need some me time.
Yeah, right.
That's not enough. That really isn't enough. Me time is okay, but yeah. Anyway, we wrapping up, and I need to go.
Yep. Okay. Much love. Take care. Have a good day. Ciao. And thank you everybody for joining us on the breakfast. God damn it. I dead named my channel again.
Yeah, you did it again.